Welcome to the Professional Edge. My name is Sean Todd, tax attorney, CPA, and certified financial planner, host here on the Professional Edge, and we have an exciting session coming on today. And what that session is on asset protection. We always talk about gaining assets and increasing our net worth and acquiring rental property, and we may have had a house and we moved out of that house and we started renting it and it's still in your individual name. So one way to add to your net worth is to be able to protect your net worth, and that is with asset protection planning. When you think about it, when was the last time you actually sat down and analyzed your risk exposure? Well, let's analyze that now before we are the defendant in a lawsuit because somebody in your rental property fell down some broken stairs that you were getting around to getting fixed, and lo and behold, they became severely injured. Well, now you will be a defendant in a lawsuit. Just watch the TV, 1-800-personal injury. They are hawking on every news channel there is on Call Me if you've been hurt. So let's avoid that. Let's be a little bit proactive in your asset protection planning. So here's the very first thing. You may have a rental property, and that rental property may be here, it may be along the panhandle, maybe a condo, and you still have it in your individual name. Well, that's your first sign to give our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798, because you have unlimited personal liability with regard to any personal injury that happens at that rental property. And let's continue with that condo down along the panhandle. You rent it out, and lo and behold, the railing you were supposed to get fixed, and it gave way when people are out having too much to drink. Well, it's still going to be your fault because you did not maintain that railing. It was rusted out. And you are aware of it because you had called several companies. And during discovery, they're going to find out your phone records and how you made 3 or 4 calls. So you had knowledge of that needed repair. So with that in mind, what would you need to do? Well, if you don't do anything, you're going to have exposure for your bank accounts, your cars, your home here in the Atlanta area or wherever you're listening to this at, given the podcast. Well, then let's sort of cap that exposure. The only thing financially that would not be exposed is your qualified accounts. That's going to be your 401k, your IRA, or Roth IRA. That is based on ERISA rules. So thank you, ERISA, for that protection. But everything else is going to be exposed. So what do you need to do? Well, here's step number 101. Let's put a liability protection fence around that condo down in South Florida or on the panhandle, and let's then isolate that liability. So now the only thing that the plaintiff's attorney can receive is the deed to the property. That's number 1, and any bank account associated with that property itself. So that's a pretty good deal instead of exposing your other assets to the claims of that potential plaintiff. So what about if you are now a real estate maven and you have several rental properties and you've acquired them over the course of several years and they're still in your individual name because that's how you qualified for the loan financing? And again, that's a wake-up call to say, hey, you know what? I have like 5 rental properties. I've acquired them in my name. I need to get a better structure today before I am actually served with a lawsuit. So the best place to start is giving our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798. And the reason why I say that is it's easier to plan ahead of the tragedy. So we'll have a conversation. We'll figure out what the strategy is, because it's amazing how people can grow their assets, but they don't know how to protect their assets. That's where the use of a tax attorney CPA comes in, and we're going to isolate that liability and build a liability fence around each one of these properties. And that way, the worst case scenario again is you deed over the property, you deed over the bank account, and probably the furnishings within that rental property if it is furnished. So that's your worst case scenario. But now you protected your other rental properties from the claims of that injured tenant at property number one. It's a pretty smart move right there. That's asset protection. That's not estate planning, it's asset protection. And a lot of individuals, we're not talking about some Swiss bank account or some trust down in the Cayman Islands and all that, or the Panama Papers. That was another big scandal that went on, the Panama Trusts. We're talking about just the bread and butter American that is trying to get ahead. And we want to protect those assets from the claims of potential creditors. Now, can you put this in force in place after you are served with a lawsuit for that personal injury? The answer is no. They can argue fraudulent transfer. So now you have another claim against you because you have to argue that this was some other reason other than to avoid liability. Well, it's not going to fly. The judge is going to say, too late, sorry, we're going to set this back. And all the properties that you transferred into these liability protection fences are going to be looked, or we're going to drive right over these fences and now attack all of your personal property. So that would be a very bad afternoon within the courtroom. So again, let's step back and say, okay, I'm a listener here on the Professional Edge. I have a couple rental properties and they're in my individual name. Just pull the deed. If they're in your name, your spouse's name, your name with your son, daughter, it doesn't matter. They're not protected from unlimited liability. So give our office a call at 877-654-9798 and say, hey, I need some asset protection planning. We'll put you on the calendar and we'll go from there. So when we put this liability protection around each one of these properties, you say, man, do I need a bank account for every single one of these? The answer is no. Well, how can that be? That's not what the other person on the internet told me. Well, that other person on the internet has no financial responsibility to you. They're just purveying general information, and they always say, we're not a licensed tax attorney or a CPA, so our advice is what you pay for it. It is free, so buyer beware, right? Because you didn't pay for anything. So when you look at that and you say, okay, what's the next thing we need to do? Well, we don't need to have a separate bank account for each one of these entities to have that liability protection. What we do is we have the structure being the top box, call that the holding company, and then underneath each one of those is the liability protection fence that we put up for each one of these rental properties. So it's going to look like a big box at the top, and then we're going to have arrows coming down to each one of these separate boxes. And each one of those separate boxes is going to be your rental properties, each individually. Well, do you need that for every single property? Well, it depends on the amount of equity you have in each one of these properties. So if you just bought one and you paid $200,000 for it, it's fully financed at about $190, so you only have 10 grand in equity. I'm okay with putting that in one of your other boxes. So that way you can save approximately $1,500 on the establishment of that liability protection fence. So that's one way to do it. And then once that equity grows, and I sort of have a threshold of $50,000 in equity, that's enough for me to want to protect. So then at that point in time, I create a new equity a liability protection fence, move that other property over, and now I protected that $50,000 of equity in that property from tainting my other equity in my other properties. So that is a little bit complicated to listen through, but what we do is isolate the liability so one tenant cannot collect the equity on all your rental properties. So if that is of importance to you as a listener here on the Professional Edge, do give us our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798. So what's the other liability protection? Well, we have these in, let's say your individual name. Well, let's make sure you give your property and casualty insurance agent a call to make sure that you are properly covered for a replacement, because we all know things have jumped in value on the replacement cost of everything. So give your P&C agent a call. No, I am not licensed as a property and casualty insurance agent, but give them a call and just take a second, take 90 minutes out of your day and go review your policy limitations on that. How much is your deductible for each one of these properties? And ask them, okay, what if a windstorm comes through and a tree falls on the house? What's covered? Well, they're going to argue that it's wind and therefore you're not covered with wind, so they'll exclude coverage. But it's pretty clear on a house fire that they will insure that risk. So just ask them scenario questions and say, okay, if this is a scenario, wind, storm, thunderstorm, and a tree gets blown over, takes out the rental property, and causes $50,000 of damage, what's my exposure? What's my deductible? And are you going to replace that? Because it's probably going to be more than $50,000 in damage to that property, and just run through those different scenarios. So that way you're covered. If you need to adjust your coverage, do it right then, get a quote, and put that coverage in place. Now you're secure and you understand what your risk on that asset and that potential loss on damage, being fire, wind. Let's say a car misses the exit and drives through the front living room. What's going to be covered? What's my deductible? So again, that's asset protection. You have this valuable piece of rental property, and if you're improperly insured, then you have asset risk. You have the risk of having to come out of your pocket through your other bank accounts or other resources to make this property whole again if you're inadequately insured. Man, I got to say that 3 times. Inadequately insured. So again, that's another note to self as a listener here on the Professional Edge. Do give your P&C agent a call. It's better to make the call now before you have any claim versus waiting until you have a claim to call your P&C agent to see what is actually covered, what your exposure is. And you may be surprised, oh yeah, that faucet that broke and it caused water damage, you're uninsured for water damage. Now, if the house burnt, you were okay, but water damage, even though the faucet broke and caused the water damage, you're uninsured. So those are not good discussions to have with your insurance agent when you're trying to make that claim. So again, to go through this and protect your liability, let's put an asset protection fence around each one of your rental properties. And to get that conversation started, give our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798. I appreciate you listening to The Professional Edge. My name's Sean Todd, tax attorney, CPA, host of The Professional Edge.
With today's financial markets, are you getting the personal and professional attention you and your money deserve? Clients of estate management counselors benefit from having one set of professionals advise them on their tax, estate planning, and investment advice. We call that the Professional Edge. Sean Todd is a tax attorney, CPA, and certified financial planner. With over 15 years' experience, he welcomes the opportunity to assist you in preparing for retirement, implement effective tax planning strategies, and to help you properly plan your estate. His radio show, The Professional Edge, is aired weekly on Sundays at 9 a.m. If you're interested in meeting with Sean, call his office at 877-654-9798. That's 877-654-9798. Do you want to feel more confident about making the right investment, tax, and estate planning decisions? Today, these decisions are more complex than ever. Have you thought about working with a professional advisor and not sure who to turn to? Not sure what qualifies one to be an advisor? Sean Todd is more than qualified as a tax attorney, CPA, and certified financial planner. Sean is with Estate Management Counselors. Estate Management Counselors operates as an independent fee-only investment advisory firm. They're dedicated to gaining a personal understanding of their clients' objectives and implementing professional counsel and advice to achieve those objectives. So take a second to talk with Sean Todd to learn how you can benefit from their multidisciplinary practice where where they coordinate their clients' legal, tax, and investment strategies into one comprehensive and integrated plan to enhance and protect their clients' financial security. You can reach estate management counselors and speak with Sean Todd by calling 1-877-654-9798. That's 1-877-654-9798.